Thank you for joining me for MLS Rules and Regulations Orientation, brought to you by the Greater Fort Worth Association of Realtors. In this session, I hope to familiarize you with some of the most common violations that we see in regards to MLS rules. We won't cover all of the rules today, but I will touch on the rules that we see the most violations through our office. Netris is the provider of MLS. They provide services to the associations, and the association provides services to you, the agent. So anyone participating in MLS is getting their services from Netris, North Texas Real Estate Information Systems. Netris provides MLS services to most of North Texas, including the DFW area. The coverage area exceeds over 48,000 square miles. It includes areas into Texoma and almost south, almost to Waco, east, almost to Tyler, and west to Abilene. Not all areas within those boundaries are covered. There are some pockets of areas that do not have coverage from Netris, but that's the general boundary for our coverage area. There are 15 associations that are part of Netris with over 35,000 MLS subscribers, and that includes over 5,000 real estate offices. So we have a very large area and a lot of subscribers participating in the MLS. This is one reason we need MLS rules. There are so many users, we have to have some boundaries as to what we can and can't do to have good, reliable data for you to do your daily business, listing and selling properties. So this, again, is why we need MLS rules. If you have garbage going into the MLS, that's what you're going to get out is garbage. So our job is to educate you, to have you familiar with the rules, and therefore having good data going in and good data coming out. If you don't have a copy of the MLS rules, you can get a full copy on the netris.net website under Resources and Forms and Documents. In this session, we'll talk about the most common mistakes that we see at GFWAR. This is not going to be covering all of the MLS rules, but the most common mistakes and the ones we get the most questions on. As I said, the rules that we'll cover today are not inclusive of all of the MLS rules, and some of them will be paraphrased, so please refer to the MLS Rules and Regulations for exact wording. We'll start with 7.05. This is the most common mistake that we see made. It is about the time frame you have in which to list a listing in the MLS. You have 72 hours from the time that the listing begins. As stated typically in paragraph 4 of your listing agreement, the date that's there, you should have it in the MLS within 72 hours of that date. The list date field in MLS determines whether there's a trigger of a violation or not. So whatever date you put into the list date field is going to determine whether you're in compliance or not. So for example, we'll say that our list date begins in paragraph 4 on the TAR listing agreement. That date that it begins is March the 1st, and you would have March the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th to enter it into the MLS. Technically 72 hours, so as long as you enter it into the system as an active listing by March the 4th, you're within compliance of the MLS rules. Anytime beyond March the 4th would trigger an automatic violation, which we will talk about in a moment when we get to those violations. The TAR listing agreement, paragraph 6A says, a broker will file this listing with one or more MLSs by the earlier of the time required by MLS rules or 5 days after the date the listing begins. Now, I'll tell you, this TAR listing agreement is used all over Texas. It is not specific to Netris. Netris has a rule that identifies a time frame that you have to enter a listing. In the event you are part of an MLS that does not have such a rule, this paragraph comes into play and the 5 days applies. But if you read that, it says by the earlier of the time required by MLS rules or 5 days after the date the listing begins. So your MLS rule says you have 72 hours, not 5 days. If you didn't have an MLS rule, then 5 days would apply, but we do and Netris, so the 72 hours applies. And move on down to paragraph 6B. It says, seller instructs the broker not to file this listing with one or more MLSs until blank days after the date this listing begins for the following purpose. That until blank days must have a number in there. It cannot be open-ended. It cannot be until the photographs are taken. It has to be a number of days. And then a reason stated. So we'll say that our listing agreement begins on March 1, but our seller needs 5 days to get photographs or some repairs made. So we're going to put 5 in that open blank until 5 days after the date this listing begins. When you enter this listing into the MLS, you will need to add 5 days to whatever date is in paragraph 4, where it states this listing begins on March 1. You're going to add 5 days to that. So in the MLS system, when you enter the listing, for the list date, you will put March 6. That's adding the 5 days to the date that the listing begins. This will eliminate any violation being triggered. Paragraph 6C states that the listing will not go into the MLS. Please explain to your seller the advantage of using MLS, the benefit for them. That's your duty as an agent, is to explain to them the benefit of using the MLS. And at the bottom, you see the MLS Rule 7.05. Each listing of property for sale or lease located within the primary service area of Netris must be filed by the listing participant with the MLS within 72 hours from the effective date of the listing, unless the owner expressly otherwise directs in writing restricting the filing with the MLS. That's where it states you have 72 hours to enter that listing. That means 72 hours from when the listing begins and until it's active in the MLS. The next rule we'll talk about is 7.10. All information concerning a listed property must be as accurate and complete in every detail as may be ascertainable by the listing agent. In other words, it's the listing agent's responsibility to make sure everything is as accurate as possible. It is not up to the buyer's agent or the buyer to verify listing data. Please do not put into the remarks buyer or buyer's agent to verify square footage, schools, area, whatever it is. Please do not put that into the listing anywhere. We will ask you to remove it, and it does not relieve you of any liability as the listing agent. It is your job to verify all of that information. If you need to verify schools, you can go to the school district's website, or you may even have to call the school district to find out what schools are zoned specifically to that property. And 7.11 says that the listing extension must be filed within 72 hours of receipt and authorized in writing by the owner. A verbal extension is not acceptable. Please consult your broker for specific brokerage requirements. So this is just saying you must have the listing extension in writing. As far as the MLS, when you need to extend a listing, you need to have that listing secured that prior to the listing expiring. You have 3 days to extend the listing in the system once it has expired, but you must have that listing extension secured before it does expire. You'll get an email notification from the system alerting you when the listing is about to expire. I believe it's 3 days prior to the expiration date. So you should have plenty of time to be able to secure that extension in writing. A verbal extension is never accepted, so please always get that in writing. And the next rule is 7.22. Listings of property may be withdrawn from the MLS by the listing participant before the expiration date of the listing agreement, providing the listing participant has written authorization from the owner of the property for the withdrawal, and the MLS cancel withdrawn status verification form is submitted to GFWAR at that time. You may not, for any reason, cancel or withdraw a property with the intent to hide the sales price. If the listing goes into the MLS, it must be closed if it's sold within that listing period. There is no exception. If the listing goes in, it must be marked as sold. You cannot, for any reason, withhold the sales price. If it's sold within the listing period, you must report that property as being sold to the MLS. And 7.27 talks about the media. Media may only be used for the specific purpose of displaying the listed property. Before using media from a previous listing, the participant or subscriber must obtain written consent from the previous listing broker. You must have written permission to use photos from a prior listing. In addition to that, you cannot have any contact information in the photo. If the sign is in front of the house, you should not be able to read what is on the sign. If we have a report of a photo that has a sign in the photo, then we will look at it. If we can read what's on the sign, we'll ask you to remove the photo. So no personal promotion, no corporate promotion in the photos. The photo description also can only describe that photo. Please don't add your email or phone number or anything like that in there either. 7.27 and 7.28. NetTrust does not permit the name, phone number, email address, or web address of the listing agent or other similar information that is not descriptive in nature and relevant to any accurate portrayal of the listed property to be placed in the property description, the photo description, driving directions in the listing. So in any of those fields, the property description, photo description, or driving directions, you are not allowed to add name, phone number, email address, web address, or any other information. The property description should only describe the property. The photo description should describe that particular photo. The driving directions should tell the agent how to get there. I know that in this day and age, we all use electronic devices, but there are some areas where you cannot receive cell service. Therefore, you may not be able to get a GPS signal. So please put driving directions in that field. And again, do not put your agent's, your name, your company name, or logo in the photo or in any of those public fields. 8.08 and 8.09, the listing participant must report to the MLS any change in the status of a listed property, including final closing of sales, within 72 hours of the status change. The listing participant has to report all pending contracts, closings, fully executed lease that involve a listed property within the 72 hours after the full extension of a contract or sale or closing of a sale or the full extension of a lease, as the case may be. We'll talk a bit more about status definitions at the end, but this is just saying that no matter the status change, you have 72 hours. Now, just because you have 72 hours doesn't mean you have to take the 72 hours. If you have an executed contract and it needs to go to pending, please go update the status. That will save other agents a lot of time and possible upset clients when they go to the property only to find out it's not available anymore when it's showing active in the MLS. So the sooner you can update the status in the MLS, the more the agents are going to know what's actually going on with that property. 10.01. The listing participant shall specify each listing filed with the MLS the compensation offered to other participants. All offers are unconditional. Any change in the compensation to the buyer's agent must be noted in the MLS before an offer is received. So once an offer has come in, under no circumstances can you go change the commission that's stated in the MLS. You have to honor whatever is stated in the MLS. As the listing agent, you have to honor that. So whatever is stated in the MLS is what you're required to honor. And once the offer comes in, you cannot change that amount for that buyer. 17.04. 17.04. No participant or subscriber has the right to give his or her MLS password or access code to third parties, nor allow MLS data to be downloaded by third parties without authorization. Any violation of this section by a participant will subject the violators to loss of MLS services in addition to any other sanctions authorized by these rules. So your login and your password for MLS is for you only. If you have an assistant, they need to have their own login. Netris is now monitoring the number of different logins for one login and password. So if you're sharing that access, they will know and they will notify you and request that you change your password. So if you have an assistant who is working for you, they need to access MLS, they must have their own login and password. Do not give them your login and password. Don't give it to your mother or your brother or your child or your best friend or your broker. Every person that touches the system should have their own login. Netris is now monitoring this, and if they detect that multiple people are using the same login, they will notify you. The easiest thing to do is to go ahead and contact the MLS department at mls@gfwar.org. We'll be happy to get that assistant set up with a login of their own. 7.14 talks about your lockbox combinations, security codes. Do not disclose any of this information in the MLS. If you're using CSS, that's the appropriate place for it. Do not ever put a gate code or a security code or a combination lockbox code in the MLS. Also, do not ever share your super key with anyone. That key is assigned to you. It is per individual. There's no such thing as a office key or partner or team key. Every person needs to have their own key. The liability of entering a property with someone else's key is too great and is not worth the risk. If something happens, the owner of that key is held responsible. So please do not borrow, don't loan your key, don't leave the PIN number with your key. Every person that needs access to a house has to be licensed and has to have their own key. Now we'll talk about status definitions. This past year, we added the new status of coming soon. Coming soon is not an active listing, but it is available in the MLS for only agents to view. The listing can be coming soon for up to 14 days. After that time, it will automatically change to temporarily off of the market. Of course, that is if you have not made it active. You should plan accordingly in your listing agreement to accommodate the coming soon period. And when that period is up, you should make it active. Once it's made active, the days on the market will reset to 0 and it will look like it's a new listing at that time. If you fail to change the listing to active after the 14th day, the listing will automatically go to temporarily off of the market and can only stay temporarily off of the market up to 30 days. After that, you will not be able to change the status. You'll have to cancel the listing and re-enter it as a new listing. So it can be coming soon for up to 14 days. After day 14, if it's not made active, it goes temporarily off of the market and can be temporarily off of the market for up to 30 days. After 30 days, it has to be canceled and re-entered. It cannot be made to active after 30 days and temporarily off the market. Listing can only be coming soon one time within a year unless there's a change in ownership or a tenant. And when you enter the listing as coming soon, the list date only for the coming soon has to be the day you're entering the listing. And that's a system limitation, has to be entered as the day you're entering the listing in the system. And as I said, when you make it active, the days on the market recalculate overnight to 0 to make it look like it's a new listing. The intended use of this status is to provide a vehicle for subscribers to notify other subscribers of properties that will be made fully available for showing and marketing after preparations have been completed. Incoming listing is not active. It's waiting to become an active listing, so it will sit there. My warning on this is if you start a listing too many days prior to when it's going to be active, you have to pay attention to that list date, because remember, that list date has to be within 72 hours of the date it's made active. So if you have it sitting as incoming and you have the list date already in there, you just need to make sure that list date is accurate and within the 72 hours when you make it active. When you have an active listing, that property is available for sale. You're taking showings, you're ready to take offers. It will expire on the original or amended expiration date that the agent has entered. But when you enter a listing as active, you're telling everyone in the MLS that you're ready to show that property and you're ready to take offers on it. You cannot make a listing active and then somewhere in the listing state that you're not showing it for X days or until this date. It has to be made available for showing and to take offers the moment that it goes active. Active option contract, there's an offer on the property, there's an option period, but you're still taking showings. Active kickout. This is such a special status that there's one time when you use the active kickout. The property has an offer that's contingent upon the sale of another property. You are still taking showings for this status. The only time you use it is when the offer is contingent on the sale of another property. Most people are not aware that this is such a specific status. So the active kickout is only used when the offer is contingent upon the sale of another property. Pending, property has an offer. You are no longer taking showings. Once you're at that stage where you are no longer showing the property, it should be pending in the MLS. The active kickout and the active option, those two statuses, you're still showing the property. Pending, you're no longer showing the property. You have to go in and change that status when you're no longer showing it. Change it to pending. Your pending listings will expire. They will stay pending until it's closed, but should you have it pending and then have to change it back to active and the expiration date has passed, it will automatically go to an expired state instead of active. We have an expired status, we have sold or leased. Withdrawn means the property is no longer available for showings. It's not available to be relisted with another broker, but for some reason, the listing broker is not fully releasing the seller from that listing agreement. Canceled is an unconditional release. They're free to list with another agent if they want to. Withdrawn, you cannot list with someone else, but canceled, you can. Temporarily off the market, we talked about a little bit. This is meant to be for a short time off the market. Anything less than 30 days. If they're having repairs made or they're on vacation and they just don't want anybody in the home, this is a good status to use for that. After 30 days, you will not be able to change the listing back to active. You will have to cancel and then re-enter the listing. The cumulative days on the market, that is in the MLS, if you want the cumulative days on the market to reset to 0, the time frame for that to be in a canceled or expired status, 30 days. After day 30, so on day 31, the days on the market would reset to 0 for a new listing. Although the history is always there in when you look at the listing history, it's always going to show there all the prior days on the market. But for a new listing, it will come in with 0 days. On the coming soon business status rules, we covered a lot of this. I'll just go through it real quickly. When you enter a coming soon listing, the amount of information that's required is less than when you enter an active listing. So if you're entering a listing, there will be some required fields, but it will be less. The list date for coming soon must be the date of entry. The days on the market will recalculate to 0 overnight once it's made active. Price changes made during the coming soon status are captured in the history. Status changes from coming soon to active are reflected as new, so it'll look like it's a new listing when they look in the system. You can have the listing as coming soon for up to 14 days. After the 14th day, the system changes it to temporarily off the market. Listings changed from coming soon to temporarily off the market must be made active within 30 days, or it has to be canceled and re-entered as a new listing. Listing must enter active status before it can enter any other status. So it can go from coming soon, it has to go to active, and then it can go to option and then pending. But it does have to go to active first. The listing cannot be returned to coming soon for 1 year unless there is a change in owner or tenant. Duplicate listing validation does include coming soon, so you would not be able to enter a duplicate listing even if it is coming soon. As far as searching and display in the MLS, coming soon listings are available for all MLS participants to search. So there's actually a status in the system where you can search for coming soon listings. They're available for auto emails and direct emails for the client portal. The coming soon listings are included in the hot sheets, and they're available for printing and export. They'll appear in My Listing Query and My Editable Listings. Coming soons are not included in market reports, production, and inventory. Agents will receive notification 3 days prior to the 14-day coming soon period ending. The agent will receive a notification when the system changes from coming soon to temporarily off market. As far as the IDX feeds, internet display fields will default to current active listing defaults. Coming soon will be included in VOW feeds to meet mandated parity requirements. Coming soon will be available in broker back office feeds. Coming soon will not be made available for IDX and portal feeds outside of the MLS. Data Checker. If you've entered a listing in the MLS, chances are at some point you're going to get a Data Checker violation. And I'm going to go through basically what Data Checker is, how it helps you, and how to handle those notifications. So Data Checker is an electronic program that validates the accuracy of your MLS data. It enforces the correction of violations as well as protects all parties from fair housing infractions. Data Checker processes listings after they're entered or modified in Matrix to help enforce rules and regulations. So Data Checker validates the data by the following processes: standardizing and verifying the address, city, county, and zip code, verifying the tax account number, the parcel ID, the PIN, the PID, whatever the county calls it. There are many different labels for that number. Validates the school district, performs searches for inappropriate words or phrases in the property description, private remarks, driving directions, and photo description. Checking prompt entry of listings and timely update of listing status changes, re-verifying changed or modified listings. When you get an email violation, it looks similar to this. And what we really want you to do is to read. It's going to tell you in red in the middle of the email what the violation is. It's going to tell you the MLS value is what was entered into the MLS system. The realist tax value is what it's suggesting you make the change to. If you have any questions about the email, the violation, whether it's incorrect, or if you feel like the violation is an error, please reply to that email, and it goes to a special inbox that's monitored daily for MLS violations, and we'll address it and work on a resolution to the violation. So what do I do if I receive a violation? When you receive the email, you just need to go make the correction. It tells you, as I said, what the violation is and how it should be corrected. There's no need for you to let us know that it's been corrected. The system will process the listing again. If it's been corrected, then no harm, no foul. We move on and no one knows any different. If the correction's not been made within the given time, you'll receive a second notice. If the correction is still not made, a fine notification is sent with the amount of the fine, and the fine is due within 10 days. Anytime you have a question about any violation, please just communicate with us, reply to that email, and let us know what's going on. We're happy to work with you. As I said initially, our goal is to prevent and eliminate violations and fines. We want to help you be a better agent for your client and provide good, accurate data in the MLS. The one violation where there is no time to correct, where there's an immediate fine, is when you enter a listing late. We talked about initially that late listing. When you enter that list date, it has to be within 72 hours of the date you make it active. So if the time frame exceeds the 72 hours, it is an automatic fine. The fine amount for the first violation is $50. You'll get an email that looks similar to this. It'll identify the violation. It'll tell you the amount of the fine. You have 10 days from that date to pay the fine. My best advice is to reply to the email, communicate with us, and let us know what's going on. If there was an error, we will ask for the listing agreement. We have to send that documentation to Netris for them to correct the list date. Just communicate with us, and we're happy to try to resolve whatever the problem is as quick as we can. Again, the late listing fine is the one violation where there's really no way to correct it. I relate it to like running a red light. If you run a red light and an officer sees you, they pull you over, they give you a ticket, you've learned a lesson, but there's really no way to go back and correct running that red light. There's really no way to go back and undo the fact that you ran a red light. So the late listing is similar to that. Once you've entered that listing and it's late, the only way to get around it is if it were a mistake. And as I said, we'll need you to send us the listing agreement that has the dates or the amendment or something that indicates that there was a different date for the list date than what you entered into the system. We can get that corrected, but we will need that listing agreement to do that. And the fine is due within 10 days from the violation date. And you can contact Crystal for instructions on making that payment. And I'll give her email address at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions about any of the MLS rules, again, these are just a sample of some of the most common violations that we see in the MLS department. Please email us, call us. mls@gfwar.org is the data checker email. And Crystal Ramadka is MLS support. She's happy to help you. I'm happy to help you. t.diaz@gfwar.org. Thank you. I hope you've learned something about MLS rules. Please contact us with any questions.